Hi. Hi, my name is Marti Murphy. I'm an emotional fitness coach and a certified EFT practitioner. I'm here with my friend and colleague, Christy Foster. And we're here to do this podcast to give you resources to help you. And the title is No One is Perfect. These are real conversations about life's messiness.
Hello, Marti. Good to see you again. Thank you. And I'm Christy Foster. I'm a psychosomatic therapist and body worker, emotional release body worker for a very long time. And I've loved that we've been doing this podcast, Marti, because it seems as though whatever it is we are going to talk about, because we do talk about it the week before, how it shows up in my life before our conversation.
All the time. It's like, oh, okay.
I think it's a good dose of reality and humility of our own humanness that yes, I think it's the reflection of, yeah, this is where you're at.
Oh yeah. I know. I love it. It's just so perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So today we have been talking about in the past podcast about the 4 survival archetypes. And we've talked about the child, we've talked about the saboteur, the victim. So the fourth one on that table, if you can think of it as a table, the 4 legs, which comes from Carolyn Mace, is the prostitute archetype. And the prostitute archetype is seen as the guardian of integrity, self-integrity, and trust of self. And the prostitute archetype, the pattern of this is, what are we willing to sell our soul for? And that comes into security. So financially, a home, a place to live, sometimes friendship, sometimes love. There's a cost on some level, and we'll go in more to that. But I also wanted to tie in, we've talked about the Wizard of Oz, and each of the aspects in the Wizard of Oz represents Dorothy, the child. These are aspects of us as human beings. In the Wizard of Oz, the prostitute archetype is the Tin Man. And if you think about symbolically, the Tin Man is rigid, right? He couldn't move. He was moving like this. And sometimes he would get rigid and rusty and he would have to oil himself. So the symbology of that is rigidity, disconnection from heart, disconnection from that fluidity of the feminine, I would say, and trusting the inner knowing. And he traded that for emotional survival and safety. And so as we look at the prostitute archetype, and remember that each one of us as human beings have the archetype. The archetype, again, is neutral. It's only a pattern of being, a pattern of energy of survival. And I think it's so important as we talk about these to remind ourselves and to remind others that it's very easy to go into judgment about, oh my God, I do that. Oh, there it is. I must be blank. To remember that we have all these until we're dead. We don't make one go away. We learn to work with them so we can integrate both the light and shadow aspects of the pattern. So as we go into, Marti, the prostitute archetype, in your world in tapping, how would you see that of one selling out to blank for safety, approval, comfort, love?
I think it's one of the predominant things that I see. And the way in the tapping world we look at it is that, this is a part of the child that learned to sell their soul. Like in the tapping world, a child will sell their soul to fit into the tribe. Because if they can't fit into the tribe, it means death to them. So they will do whatever it takes. You hear that all the time, like about children, or even say a woman staying in a circumstance. To me, it's that prostitute, the child part that learned to survive that way. So in the tapping world, we would tap on, for sure, the first place I go with it is the judgment of self.
Mhm.
about having this aspect to us, because even the word prostitute can be so triggering itself. First time I heard it, I was like, what? And where's the male version of that? All that stuff. Where's the gigolo or whatever? Of course they make it a female, it's that whole thing.
Yep.
And I caught all that, and like, there's male prostitutes and all that. And even in reality of a prostitute, what was their upbringing that made them decide that that's something that they needed to do to survive? So I always go to the judgment of self first, because we can't change what we judge, and to realize that that survival pattern God instilled in childhood is there. It worked.
Yeah.
Fawning, all that stuff, fawning, placating someone else. It worked as a child. And that child is brilliant to have learned how to fawn, how to do that for security, to anything to survive. And yet we become adults and then make ourselves wrong for that. Instead of, like, to your point, Christy, to see that it's neutral, it's there to help us survive. And how can we integrate that part of us and see that part and judge it less? And tapping would be absolutely the first order, is to judge it less.
Yeah. And uh how I think it's really important to understand, just as a reminder, we've also talked about this, what is fawning?
Yeah.
Fawning is a pattern of behavior that is over pleasing, can be the codependent, can be the martyr, can be this person as an adult that understands safety as such.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is very easy to judge when we aren't in someone else's shoes about, why do they do that? Why can't they do this? Why can't they do that? And I would say, as we listen to our own heads, when we notice ourselves going into judgment, to slow down and pay attention, but also know that it isn't any of our business where people are at or why they're there.
Right. Yeah.
And and as we talk about the prostitute archetype, because you're right, that word is a charge. And it's I think it's interesting too, because the prostitute holds the charge of sexuality and shame.
Oh my God. If you're Catholic, which I was raised, there's nothing remotely related to any of that. Sex and shame. It's like,
Oh.
sex is bad, save it for the one you love.
Well, and then I'm sure you've seen as many clients as I have about even enjoying sex,
Oh my
because
God,
that's
right?
what
Like,
what the teachings are in that tribal system.
yeah, right.
And that's a whole other podcast.
I know.
We won't go down that road. But coming back to the prostitute archetype, um, one of the things that I learned when I was first learning about the aspects of the light and shadow, so the parts that we can't see in ourselves, the parts that we're aware of, what I wasn't aware of in my own prostitute archetype was my go-to response was, well, let me ask so and so. I wasn't trusting my own knowing. And Marti, you were on my list of, well, let me talk to Marti. And what I appreciate about my husband is, he said, because this is what we talk about a lot, he's like, I don't think you need to ask anybody. What do you think? What do you feel? And I had never noticed that was my go-to, of asking other people what they think, what would you do, and then it would spin out into a whole other realm of stuff that I wouldn't do, because that's not how I talk,
Right.
not how
Oh,
I work. But it would create so much chaos again
yeah.
in my own head, that prostitute would, um I wasn't being my own guardian for my own truth. I was
Yeah.
letting other people tell me what my truth was, and that's just laughable, because how
Yeah.
would they know that? They don't know that.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to that just kid is looking for the affirmation because I always
Mhm.
like in the tapping world, I'd say this is how self-doubt comes into place. A little boy comes home and he's like, Mommy, I'm cold. And she goes, You can't be cold. I have the thermostat set at 75, but he's still cold. Something that simple
Yeah.
starts to instill self-doubt, so it's those little nicks that happen over time where we doubt the self. I mean, and Christy, I remember that. I do it way less now. It's not that I don't do it, I do. But I noticed like I would go around and ask every single person I know, like, what's their opinion? But what I realized is I just asked and asked and asked till someone said what I thought was the truth. And then I'd like, see, okay, I knew I was right, but I needed that affirmation, you know,
Yep.
and it was like endless. And I actually have a friend right now that does that a lot. And it's that constant reminder of like, okay, just go within, what's happening for you. And it's just that learning to go within and learning to trust the self when we were taught to do anything but that.
Yeah, because we all grow up in a tribe,
Yes.
and that can have religion or not. I don't think that
Ex-
matters.
I don't either.
It's a nuance to, and the importance of a tribe is to keep you alive,
Right.
supported, fed, belong. And as, and some people never leave their tribe, some people do.
Yeah.
And for me, I was one that did. And I remember coming out of that tribal system, um, very disoriented, just like you were saying, and asking people and searching for validation, for help, for resources. And I continue to do that. I don't think that's negative.
Right. I don't
But
either.
what you're saying, which I appreciate, is within the child's experience, if you grow up in a culture or a tribal system that gives you a set of rules, and if you don't follow these rules, then you're going to die, or then you'll be put out into outer darkness, or then you're bad. There's all of these, like
I'm
I
gonna go
call
to
them
hell.
spell casting,
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
because you're creating a spell within also the child's psyche that if I do this, then this is going to happen. It doesn't mean it's true. However, what is true is whatever we believe is true.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. It's
And
so
so
true.
what is that for you?
Yeah. And like you, I grew up in a system, they didn't want you to think for yourself. In fact,
Mm.
if you did, you typically got punished and that because they want you to believe and be subjugated to like the rules that they have in place. And they didn't want independent thinkers. So when you started to question, typically you were punished. So of course you're going to stop like, having your own train of thought about things and having that validated. So you would do whatever it would take to survive.
Yeah. And that's where I think it's really helpful, Marty, to have this conversation so it doesn't offer more judgment,
Right. We
because
all
that's
have
not the
plenty of
idea.
that.
We do, and it's really a noticing of your own patterns. And
Absolutely.
I would also encourage the piece that when you notice the patterns to, okay, how can I resource that part of me that doesn't trust my own knowing?
Hmm.
Um, Sometimes it's as easy as asking someone, a friend that knows you, and the friend reflects, well, what do you feel?
Right.
Not this is
What-
what I think or what you should do, but let's just slow down and see what your heart tells you.
Right. Yeah. Because I have a friend I do that with too. Like I'll say, well, this is how it comes to me, but what do you think? What do you
Yeah,
feel? And imagine being asked that as a child over and over. What do you think? What do you feel?
I can't even imagine.
What?
Oh, to raise our children over.
Right, right. I do remember this pops in my head. My daughter told me this a while back. She goes, Mom, I remember when I was little, you told me so many times, like, Bailey, just go inside. And if it doesn't feel right for you, trust that. She goes, and I
Mhm.
really learned to like live by that for the most part. Like, I've been able to say no about things because I'm like, no, that doesn't feel right to me. And I'm like, wow. Like,
Okay, Marty.
I don't even remember telling her to do that, but I'm like so glad I did, probably because I was so told the opposite.
That is probably why.
Yeah.
And the search that we all go on to find our own knowing.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised, Marty, because you'd probably already done enough healing work on yourself to kind of bandage that part.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I know. I was just like,
That's
because Lord
awesome.
knows I've been able to judge myself for all the things. Just send me the therapy bills and sorry, and I'm sorry, like all those. And to that
Yeah.
too, Christy, it's that piece of when I look back as a parent for things that I did that were less functional as a parent, and I mean judged the heck out of myself for it. And I look when I got to the place, and tapping has really helped me with that I was like, Artie, there's no way you could have done it any differently
Yeah.
in the way you were raised. And also to learn that the part of me that prostituted myself that I had such judgment about was actually the same part that saved me.
Yeah.
That was huge. I
Yeah.
mean, the first time I heard that, I just started to cry. I'm like, oh my God, that part saved me.
Well, it brings such compassion
Yeah,
to the whole experience, and that you're in the experience again.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
Beautiful point, Marty.
right.
One of the statements of the prostitute is, and I hear this a lot in my work, is I don't want to rock the boat,
Right.
and I don't care how much it costs me to keep the peace. That is a core sentence of the prostitute, and betrayal of self,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
betrayal in such a way that you don't have your needs met, which can be going into fawning. But the reason I bring that up, if you hear yourself saying, so someone can be abusive or taking advantage of you, doesn't have to be anything big, but if you hear yourself saying, well, I just don't want to rock the boat, I'll do what it takes to keep the peace. The part that I would ask you as a somatic therapist is, what is that costing you? Because energy has to move. We are energetic beings. And the whole idea of this podcast is to educate you in hopefully a different way to understand how your system can work with you instead of against you. And so if you tend to say that in your head, or that's been your experience, to ask yourself, where is it sitting in me, that
Mm.
piece? And I would call it, maybe betrayal's not the right word, but you're not speaking up for what's true for you. I don't want to do that, but
Yeah.
I'll do it to keep the peace. Where do you feel that charge in your body, to bring awareness to it, so it's not stuffed and stuffed and stuffed? And then what happens in somatic work is you either get an explosion of that energy, and then you go, I don't know who the hell that was. Wow.
Right.
Or an implosion, which can sometimes lead into pretty severe depression and
Mhm.
isolation.
Yeah. Right. I love that. I think we've all had that experience. I just did this recently where somebody asked me something, hey, do you want to hear about this? And I knew my answer was, no, I'm not really interested, but I hear myself go, sure.
Oh, I've done that
And I'm
so
like, oh
much.
my God. I said, sure. And then I'm like, okay, how do I cut this down? I was just like,
Oh my goodness, yes.
and the other thing I noticed too is I'll do this more so with my husband. I'll be like, well, I know this is probably going to cause World War III, but I'm going to say this anyway. Because I've had to learn, over time,
Yeah.
I'm going to say it anyway, because I'll pop if I don't say it. Like, that's how I feel like
Yep.
pop if I don't bring this up. And that's like literally been such a journey over time. And I noticed the longer we're together and the more we like are working on our own stuff, it doesn't cause World War III. It doesn't mean that it doesn't at times, but it's like,
Yeah.
this doesn't have to cause World War III. But that was my thing. I know it's probably going to cause World War III, but I got to say it anywhere. I'm going to pop. So,
Well, and that's trying to manage something that has been volatile.
yes, yes. Yeah.
And sometimes I think, Marti, in that context, your husband might not have ever experienced himself as volatile.
Right.
And
Right.
and so what is going on in your brain might be very different than his
Yes.
about you speaking up about something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because
Right.
I think over time, it can really, the stories we tell ourselves can really grow
Oh my God. Right.
like
Yes.
mold and
Yeah.
grow and grow. And then I just want to keep the peace literally is like a webbing around your nervous system, because then World War III will happen. And I say that because what if it didn't?
Right. Which now a lot of times that's not the case. And
Yeah.
even I think like I always look at it as on a pendulum. As a child, I was suppress, 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 which so many are. And then it's like swing over here, and it's like, you're the opposite, like, what? And, you become
Yeah.
like like the ultra warrior self, but not always in the most functional way, if that makes sense. Just like, and then you're just so like, I always would say sometimes, like, I've turned into a nuclear reactor. Like you say it, and it's like, boom,
Oh,
the implosion. And to find like, so you're here, then you go here.
yeah.
That's a natural part to me of
Yeah.
being over here, the pendulum. And then it just goes, then you start to find more of this like place in between where it's like you can be very direct and you don't have to be hostile. And then it's like, but it's just a work, it's a journey, it's a work in progress forever.
It is. And I think that I remember the first time that I'd been to a conference, a 2-week conference of somatic learning that I didn't know what I didn't know. And I remember coming home and um because my tendency is to suppress and not talk, not talk, not talk. And then there was an explosion because of this 2-week opening. And I remember after, I think in the moment though, too, I remember watching myself like over here going, what are you doing? Because I said something to my husband and I couldn't stop what I was saying, which normally I would. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is going to be messy. And to his credit, once we both calmed down, more me than him
Yeah.
that day, which was rare, he
Yeah.
said, you would have divorced me if I would have said that to you like that.
Uh,
And which is true. Like,
yeah.
and I appreciate the relationship of the allowing and the
Yeah.
truth, the truth behind it too, because that pendulum, I think that's how we grow, is to swing and to be messy. Because if you've never
Yes.
done it, how would you even know how to say it?
Yeah. Oh,
Whatever
yeah.
it is.
Right. Yeah, and my husband said that to me years ago, and I think it to again to his credit, because women are often, I think, taught the fairy tale.
Yeah, there is no fairy tale.
Please, please. If ever there's a setup for dissatisfaction, it's that. I remember years ago a woman saying that romance novels are women's porn. And if you want to
Yeah,
be dissatisfied with your life, keep reading romance novels. And there's so much truth to that. But like my husband's like, Mart, you act like, coming from our backgrounds, like we're supposed to know how to do this,
yeah.
right? And he was right. There was a part of me that's like, yeah, but it's like the fairy tale. And I'm like, where where did you come from?
Mhm.
You did not come from anything remotely resembling a fairy tale between
No,
parents. So it
no.
was like, wow, yeah, like and I do hear that in other, I would say women in particular, where I'm like, wow, there's the fairy tale.
Yeah,
Belief that the and that's the bill of goods that I think, and I've said this, I think, in this before too. The romance, like the romantic comedy, ends when they've hooked up.
yeah.
It doesn't tell you what happened after they hooked up and all the work that goes into that.
And there is a lot, and I add to that, and this helped me have a very different perspective of the archetypes, Marty, is Carolyn Mace would teach, we all have 12 core archetypes, 12, 10,
Mm,
2, 12 core archetypes. When two people get married, you have two archetypes. So we'll say the princess and the knight, right?
yeah,
So the princess needs rescued. That's the fairy tale. And the
right.
knight loves to rescue. And then they make the contract. They walk in the door. Each of them have 11 suitcases behind them of baggage within their own archetypal structure. And
Oh
then
my
they say things like, I don't know who you are.
God.
You've changed. Who is this person, for ourselves and the other?
Oh
But
my God, it's
I
so
find
true.
it hysterical because, of course, that's the truth.
Right.
And
Right.
that's why relationships are so challenging,
Yes, they are. Yeah, their
because
work.
their
Yeah.
work, and
Yeah.
it's you opening your own suitcases.
Yeah,
It's not about
absolutely.
their suitcases.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to me, that was so helpful because I thought, oh, it is that hard. Yep.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and you got to unpack all these people that have entered the room with your
Right.
marriage. You're like, there's a lot of them.
Yeah, there really is. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I'm reminded to slow down in those moments because sometimes
Yeah.
it can just consume the relationship or consume me personally.
Yeah, absolutely. I ran into a woman last Friday I hadn't seen in a really long time. And it was really interesting because we were having a really nice conversation, but she was basically, I was telling her back when I was working with her in this world before, and I was like, yeah, I was telling her about this conversation with the guy that I had that owned the company I was working for at the time. And I was like mad. And I was like in my garage and I'm like, I'm not letting go. I'm like a dog with a bone until this guy admits it. And I'm telling her, and he finally goes, "You're right. I did that," like that. And she goes, "I'm so surprised that that's a conversation that you would have." And I'm like, "Seriously?" She goes, "No, like you're the Chrissy, you'll die laugh. You're the sweetest person." I
You
was
do
like,
have that archetype too, Marty.
I do, but I guess I was like, sweet, sweet. I think anybody that knows me, no one's going to go, she's really sweet, But so my daughter was there and I go, Bailey, come over here. And I was like, this gal thinks I'm really sweet. And she goes, that I never have a temper and I don't get angry.
What did Bailey do?
Bailey's
Laugh?
like, what? She goes, okay, you can keep that illusion. That's what she,
That sounds
and
like
then
a good response.
Liam was walking by and I was like, Bugs, come on. I call him Bugs, come over here. And I go, doesn't think I have a temper. And he goes, seriously? She's a wombat. That's what he said. And this gal's like, oh my God, that's totally changed my opinion of you. And like what blew my mind is I'm like, who was I back when I knew her? That like I came off that way to her. Like I don't,
Well,
you
Marty,
know,
that would be the fawning piece that you talked about in the
yeah.
beginning.
Yeah, it was like, wow, like that's interesting that I came off that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a long time ago. So I'm sure you're right, is back in the part of me that's like, oh, I've got to be nice, be pleasing, be kind
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
You know,
Tells you how far you've come.
don't rock the boat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what one of my, what I try to explain to people about that phrase, don't rock the boat, is we all have our own boat. Their boat
Oh,
is
yeah.
their business. Get off their boat.
Right.
If their boat rocks, it's theirs to figure out, not yours.
Right. And that's the journey.
It is, because then anxiety comes.
Yes.
Sometimes the threat of just what we're talking about with prostitute, the threat of he'll leave me or she'll leave me if I do blank.
Right.
Let me rephrase this. If I step out of the boat onto my own boat, that boat, neither he nor she, might rock. And how do I process and sit with that?
Right. That's so interesting, Christy, because I had epiphany this morning when I was hiking about my abandonment issues, which I think are so tied to fawning and doing, all that, like, don't leave me, don't leave me, don't leave me. And in my first marriage, all of a sudden I was thinking about myself when we were dating and newly married, and the judgmental part of me was like, I was a pain in the butt because I was definitely very, at times desperate.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden I was thinking about this incident that had happened with my ex and I, and I, and the judgment I had of myself. And all of a sudden I'm like it was like I should have had a V8. I was like, oh my God, that of course I behaved that way. Like I had such compassion in that moment, like that was that abandoned kid. Of course I did that. And
Yeah.
like it was like we in EFT we call it the cognitive shift. All of a sudden the brain's like, I totally understand why I behave that way. And it was like the
Mhm.
judgment completely fell away and was like, yeah. And it was like, wow. And that's what I see with the tapping is like the more you tap, the more it has a cumulative effect. And you'll have that you're just be out hiking and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, the brain just rearranges and sees
Yeah.
something a whole new way. And you're not even tapping. So it
I
was,
love those moments.
I do too. You're like,
I love those moments because
right.
somatically, how I see that, Marty, is it creates more space in our nervous
Yeah.
system, in our psychic field, and our physical body. Like
Right.
you can breathe better. Your diaphragm unlocks. Usually you'll have less tension in your lower back and your hips because when you're in that, we'll call it a pleasing mode or don't rock the boat, the body is responding directly to what's happening here,
Yeah.
and it will contract, it'll contract. And with prostitute being connected to the heart and relationship, we're looking at the pelvis somatically and the heart. So even we've all felt those moments where we don't want to rock the boat and
Right.
or throw people out of the boat. Sometimes the heart starts to palpitate really, really fast.
Oh, I so feel
Or
that myself.
yeah, and that's an indication. I guess I really would like to emphasize that people can listen to their bodies, that it's not just their head that's reacting. If you're having heart palpitations, and sometimes it can also be issues with like female issues, painful
Oh
pain
my
in the
goodness. Yeah.
ovaries, pain in the uterus, and it will go into the heart, and then it will also come to show up because that energy moves up in the body. And if
Yeah.
we continue to push it down, it will create a lot of tension in the throat, which is
Yeah.
expression, and in the jaw. So clenching of the jaw, holding those words back. And I, one of the other key phrases is I just keep my mouth shut
Oh yeah. Right.
and blow it off. It doesn't go anywhere but inside here.
So true. It's so true. I I have a family member that used to be like, just let that go. I was like, what? Thank you for that Einstein comment. How?
Yeah, that
How do I
comment.
just let that go? I was like, what? It's like I short circuited. Oh, I
Yeah,
didn't think of that. Just let it go. And I'm like, trying to this is me letting it go. Claw marks going down
right,
the wall. I'm letting
right.
go. Yeah. It's I had years ago, again, I had someone that I worked with and I'd get that pressed lips. It was hilarious. You go, your sphincter muscle must be very tight right now.
Yes, because that's where it's connected.
Exactly. Exactly. And I noticed that in tapping with people too, Christy, because like I have one client in particular who was she's almost 90 and was just suppressed, suppressed, suppressed. And when she starts talking about stuff, she's like, oh God, I feel it right here. I feel it in my
Oh,
jaw.
good,
All the
good.
time she's feeling it. So then, in tapping, we can do chasing the pain, tap on the physical. And again, this is what I find is interesting in the tapping world. When somebody's like, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, we often say, well, if you don't know, it's because it's something that happened before you had words. And then go into the body. Where are you
Yeah.
feeling your body? And the body, like you said, it's the way in the tapping world to have them go within a little, like, where are you feeling it? And then just tap through that. And
Mhm.
then the emotions start to open up
Yeah.
as you're going through the body.
And with my work with clients, I think that's something, especially the longer I do the work, the more that I trust their body more than my head or my strategy of what I think it might be,
Yeah. Oh, it's so
because their system does know. I can't know that for them.
right.
I am truly not a psychic. I think that'd be a fun job, but I'm not.
Right.
And what what the encouragement is about that is that they can begin to access their own intelligence
Yes.
within a safe space. A lot of times it's with a guide because we get wrapped up in our own heads about what we think it means.
Right.
And I wanted to bring in this aspect too, Marty, that might be helpful with our tapping today. With the I don't know, when I hear an I don't know, and we're taking a journey through the flesh, the question of, and we've talked about this, Marty, if you did know, what might it be?
Right.
And that if you feel nothing or you don't know, that is the knowing.
I love that. I love that, Christy. And then, like, to ping with that, in the tapping world, we'd say, if you had to guess, it's amazing how if you say, if you had to guess, then something comes, because it's, for some reason, it seems to let off pressure. Like that,
Yeah.
if I had to guess, I'd say, and there's usually always an answer that comes.
Well,
So,
I think it bypasses the brain,
right. Yeah.
and it also allows the space for, I think, expressing what's truly felt
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
without danger, because you're only guessing.
Right.
And
Right.
that goes right back to tribal system of, I'm not allowed to say that.
Right. Like, it's almost like a game. Oh, you're gonna guess.
Right. And then it's, that's the piece though. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
there's no consequence for guessing because I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I'm
I'll just
guessing.
take a guess.
Yeah. I'm just guessing. Doesn't
Yeah,
even happen to anything. It's so fascinating.
it is.
Yeah.
And so as we go into some tapping around the prostitute, I would
Yeah.
love for you to bring in some of those aspects of I don't know,
Yeah.
and that bridging statement of what if.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, as you're listening to Marty tap and we do it, to really bring consciousness as well into the lower part of the pelvis, the heart space, and notice any activations safely in your body, and notice them and do the tapping and see what settles in you.
Yes. Always. Yeah. Let's do it. Now, is taking full responsibility for yourself. We'll start tapping karate chop. Even though I don't know what's going on for me. I choose to acknowledge this truth right now. Even though somebody asks me how I'm feeling, I just feel pressure to respond, the pressure to know. What if it's okay to not know? And trust that it could come. Even though I don't know what's happening for me, maybe it feels scary, even dangerous to speak my truth. That wasn't allowed for me. I choose to honor myself right now. I don't know, but I feel like I should know. But what if the truth is, I was trained to not trust myself,
Mhm.
trained to not know, to find the answers outside of myself. And if I had thoughts of truth, it wasn't safe to rock the boat. So I don't know.
Mm.
But what if I could guess? If I had to guess, I might feel and just see what comes. That seems to take the pressure off. Because if it's not safe to know, if it's not safe to have my answer, then of course I'm not going to know.
Mm.
And what if I could let the part of me that doesn't feel safe in the knowing off the hook? I don't have to know. But if I had to guess, I might say what? Less pressure, better answers. And I like the idea that it's okay not to know, that it's okay to guess, and to go into my body. Where do I feel it in my body? And just practice honoring that feeling. And what if that's a great place to start without all the pressure? And take a breath.
Mm. And as you take a breath and let it out, really bring awareness into your hips and your pelvis and your belly, and let that also relax with your breath. Noticing any tension in your pelvis or belly, and let that soften as we bring softness to that part of not knowing. And also relax your jaw, because that's where so much tension can be held in relation to the pelvis, in relation to speaking up or swallowing your words. And as you take that breath, to allow yourself to understand and bring compassion to the parts that created that fear. It will help your body. It's like giving it its own shot of vitamin C, something positive and helpful, which is compassion.
Mm, yeah, I like it. Vitamin C, vitamin
Mm-hmm.
compassion. That's all.
Vitamin of compassion. Yes.
Yes.
And since we're in the prostitute archetype, the vitamin of truth, right? Your
Yes.
own truth, your own knowing in your heart. And I feel like reminding everyone that Tin Man in the Wizard of Oz, the tendency was rigidity. And when we become rigid in our thoughts, we literally start to become rigid in the flesh, because our emotions are the soft tissue in the body.
Right.
And when you have that rigidity and internal dialogue, you're going to feel it somewhere in your body. You might not be able to turn your neck because you're not seeing different perspectives of your internal world.
Right.
And then it becomes externalized outside of us.
Yeah. I love that.
So remember that there's many aspects of us moving all the time. And no one is perfect once again. And that's why we're here, to
Yeah.
offer our own experience and some resources in that truth that no one is perfect.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So Thank you for joining us again today, and we hope to see you next time.
See you next time. Bye for now.